I do want to bring in Jeremy Rosenthal, a legal expert here, to talk a bit more about this here and learn a bit more about the case. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thank you.
All right, first question here for you. Just give us a broad overview, what we know, who the players are here, and who is charged.
Right. So as you kind of said before, in the big picture, we've got personal assistants, we've got physicians, we've got sort of a chain, if you will, of people who provided him this lethal cocktail. If you want to think of it in terms of, or comparing it to Michael Jackson's death, he died from a propofol overdose, which was essentially a link to basically one or several people who were just over-treating him, over-prescribing it. This is going to be a little bit different. The reason why this is different is even though ketamine can, as you said, be legal, in this instance, the autopsy revealed that it just wasn't a clinical dose. He was getting it from the black market. And so this case is in many ways more like a traditional drug conspiracy case. They're following the leads from these illegal drugs, where they came from, who had it, and who gave it to him. And simply put, the dosage that he took was simply too great to be that of a prescribing physician. So what they've done is they've cracked down on the chain, if you will, of folks who supplied him with what ultimately killed him.
And so two people, including the assistant there and a Perry acquaintance, have pleaded guilty to conspiracy to distribute the drug. The physician also agreed to enter a guilty plea. So what comes next here in terms of a timeline?
So what the feds typically do when they investigate a case like this, and we are seeing a textbook federal investigation, that is, we don't see a lot, we don't hear a lot. I think we heard a few rumblings several months ago with the postal warrant that they may have executed on some mail packages, but you don't see or hear a lot. And then what they do is they round everybody up at once, and they're ready to go to trial when they bring an indictment. So what you have are very compelling, very sweeping cases, and you've got the defendants basically jockeying for protection. The ones who go and make a deal first tend to get a better deal, and they're going to fold in on anybody who's left standing. I think these all result in guilty pleas. If anybody goes to trial, they're going to have 3 or 4 of these co-defendants testifying against them. So that's kind of, if anything, what you see next. But the indictments are pretty sweeping. The evidence on these drug chain cases tend to be pretty strong. It's proving somebody died from a ketamine overdose, that's difficult. But proving that person 1 shipped it to person 2 in the 21st century with our data chains, that's easy stuff.
Yeah, and you were just talking about the evidence there. I want to read this out. One of the doctors, Placencia, wrote in a text message to a co-defendant, quote, "I wonder how much this moron will pay," and quote, "let's find out." That's according to that indictment. When you have evidence like that, how hard is that going to be to defend that? You know, because I feel like when you have that in a text and it's something like that to that extent of saying this moron, how hard is that going to be to defend that?
Well, it's terrible, obviously. And you're talking about victimizing a very vulnerable person and doing it for money. It's really, really difficult. What you can't do is you can't let a jury really ever get their teeth on that. And if you can prevent a judge from getting his teeth on that or her teeth on that, that's fine too. You're looking for technicalities. You're looking for issues with the search warrant. You're looking for other types of really hyper technical things, which get you out of the evil clutches of the monster that's coming down for you. But a lot of times those just aren't there, because in those instances, at least you can argue, okay, these texts are bad, this evidence is bad, but we don't even get there. We don't even get to second base because we can't get to first base, and we can't get to first base because the search was bad, because the warrant was bad, because this was bad. So if I'm their lawyer, that's what I'm doing. I'm going through all the chain of evidence, and I'm trying to find a way to make it to where there's not a human being who's sitting in judgment on that statement. Because if and when a human being is listening to that statement whoever said that is going to get hurt and hurt hard in a court of law.
Looking ahead to the trial there, what could the potential sentencing be?
So these are going to go by the federal sentencing guidelines, and in drug cases, there tend to be certain mandatory minimums, and then there's maximums, and it's gonna it's like a big grid, if you will. Everybody here's looking at time. Just to be clear on this, when you've got this amount of drugs being brought in, and it results in death, and there's a conspiracy, and you have leaders, and you have followers, really all these folks are going to do time. In some instances, some could do 10 years or more. But a lot of the games here, when you're talking about the federal sentencing guidelines, again, it's a big grid. And you score points, if you will, negative points that raise you up on the grid for things like being an organizer, for things like being a leader. Also, your criminal history will score you points. And that's why these guys are all racing to make deals, because they get points taken off for participating. They get points off for cooperating. So if somebody doesn't plead and takes this to trial, well, then you could get good credit as another defendant for testifying against that person. But each and every one of these people are looking at time, and they're looking at a lot of it. This is really ugly stuff.
I'm interested to hear how you think that this is all going to play out in the end, if you are able to share your thoughts on that.
I don't see any of these going to trial. Again, from what the press conference that the Department of Justice had, this is what they do. They put an army of people on it. They put an army of very competent people on it to trace these things down. They try to make a foolproof case, and what they'll do is they'll come out, and the minute that they round everybody up, they're ready to go. They're ready for trial. You've already had 2-3 people fold and cave and agree to plea on this case. Their goal is going to be to get everybody to plea. I think that's probably what happens. If there's a difficult charge here in all of this, it's hard to prove that the death occurred because of the ketamine. Matthew Perry drowned. He drowned, I think, in his bathtub. And it's easy, but it's hard, right? I think common sense and conventional wisdom says, well, of course, it was the overdose that caused him to drown. The court of law doesn't really work that way. You gotta connect the dots just a little bit better. There may be a fight in somewhere in that, but really, these look like guilty pleas to me.
Matthew Perry died in October of last year, so that is coming up on a year here. Why did it take so long to announce that 5 people have been charged in connection with this?
They're connecting the dots. Sometimes these paper trails and electronic trails can take a little time to decode. They were intercepting mail. They were having warrants at the post office. They were seizing computers. Takes a minute to kind of decode some of that stuff. Also, a lot of these folks are using aliases in these types of cases. So you're really not so much connecting names to names. You're connecting bank accounts with bank accounts. You're connecting other types of identifiers that really get you to the true source. So it's just going to take a minute, but they're measuring twice, cutting once. That's what we want them to do. And probably that's what they've done here. Now, maybe one of the lawyers is able to get into this case, get into the dirt, get into the mud, and maybe there's an issue here that somebody can fight on. But again, it doesn't really look like it. But these things kind of take time. And all things considered, I mean, we've seen federal cases take 2, 3, 4, 5 years. This one's pretty quick relative to that.
Lots of great insight. Thank you there, Jeremy. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to the conversation before I let you go?
No, but again, I just can't say enough that when you're defending a case like this, when you have quotes like that one about how much will this moron pay, you're doing anything and everything you can do to really avoid the facts of it if you can. You want to focus on, you can win a case in front of a jury if you've got compelling facts and if you've got a story to tell, and to some degree, if your client is likable. If what you've done is really bad and awful and despicable, and you've got quotes like that, then you're really scrambling for other ways to try to create value for your client and win the case. Like I said, I think these all end in plea negotiations or plea deals. I would be surprised to see any of these go to trial. Anything can happen, but we should all be thankful that Matthew Perry and his family are getting some justice for the victim that he really was.
Appreciate you coming on here on Live Now from Fox to break that all down for us, Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you.